What's up, summoners? King Blair here. Today, for Top 5 Tuesday, we're going to be talking about the top 5 units that are washed up. So these are units that used to be super used, super meta, used to see a ton of play, but because of new units, new metas, they are not seeing as much play as they used to in the past. So if you like the video, make sure you like, subscribe, and join the Discord server, link down in the description. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. So as I mentioned before, it's going to be units that were really good before at one point in the game, but now are not really doing much to really change the meta up at all. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. This does not mean that these units are useless. You can still definitely useless in certain situations, and every once in a while, they're still nice to pull out, but they're not nearly what they used to be. And it's kind of weird, especially when we go over the units and we discuss how strong they were in the past. You'd be like, yeah, I remember that, especially if you were playing around from a while from now. But with that out of the way, and if you think I missed one, make sure to comment down below which unit you think I missed. But first, let's start with an honorable mention. The honorable mention is actually going to be Faithless Litica. Surprisingly, she's not seeing nearly as much play in cleave teams, and people are using a lot of other cleave units in place of her. The reason for this is things like Last Order Craw Barrier has made it harder for her. Things like Fallen Cecilia, since you can't strip the barriers. Things like Cerise that are very common now that can easily outspeed her, since Cerise is in a whole different speed bracket than Faithless Litica. She often does get outsped. So there are a lot of checks to Faithless Litica, as well as the usual counters like General Purgus, right? So there's a lot of counters to Faithless Litica right now. And the thing about it is cleavers are not really using her that often anymore because they have better options now. They still have access to Oxlots. They still have Flan, who is the new premier cleave setup unit who is going to be Flan. They have access to Operator Sigrid, who kind of functions like a Faithless Litica, but gets to push back. And that kind of helps a little bit since Faithless Litica pushes up, Operator Sigrid pushes back, but Operator Sigrid also gives you an attack buff and also gives you the opportunity to do an S2 and kill a unit later in the fight, right? And then there's also just people just cleaving with Cerise to take away the pick, right? So she's not seeing nearly as much play. Now, this is not set in stone yet. She may come back up, but right now it's looking like she's taking the back seat, and she really has not been seeing nearly as much play as she used to, right? So she's kind of an honorable mention because it is a little bit more recent. It's new to this season with all the buffs that they've done to cleave and just the way that the counters play out. It's just she's become a little bit less popular, right? Will we see her again? There's a good chance, which is why she's going to be an honorable mention. Now let's actually look at the top 5. At number 5, we have Silver Blade Araminthia. This is a unit that at one point was the meta. Her and Sage Ball were just absolutely disgusting, right? And she used to be a unit that could just destroy a team right away. They nerfed her. She never really came back from that. They did try to buff her again, and she kind of saw a small resurgence with Broman, and then you had Silver Blade Araminthia, and it was pretty nice for a while, right? She was seeing a lot more play. But now that we have Carrot, there's a unit that can strip instead of burns. And now that we have Fairy Tail Tenebria, there is a unit that can take away turn 1 and do a bunch of other debuffs and strip, right? So the fact that this S3, although it's a very crushing skill 3, right? Burn, unhealable, right? All these debuffs that can just stack up and make someone's day miserable. Why use it when there's Fairy Tail Tenebria for taking away turn 1 and locking down the opponent and giving way more dangerous debuffs, as well as being able to strip, because she does not strip on this S3, so she requires setup. Fairy Tail Tenebria does not require setup, right? And then with Carrot, if you want a burn unit, right, you want to burn the opponent, why not just use Carrot, right? Carrot just does way more damage, can soul burn, can strip, apply burns, and then pop the burns, right? So Silver Araminthia kind of got power crept just because there's better options for what she does. Fairy Tail Tenebria being the big one, as well as Carrot kind of taking away that other uniqueness factor to her that was the burns, right? So both those really unique factors were taken away from her. Can you still use her? Yes, she's still really good in Guild Wars, right? She's still a really fun unit to use in Guild Wars. You can use her in Guild Wars, and she still sees a level of success there. Although with Guild Wars, with control units, it's always a little risky, since if you're using control units for Guild Wars, there's a good chance you got 15% it and lose a fight. So there's that. And with so many cleansers in the meta, it's pretty hard that she's going to be seeing play again anytime soon, aside from being a good niche pick. But that's going to be number 5. Now, at the number 4, we actually have a unit that was a lot more popular and just honestly fell off a lot harder. And that is going to be Alencia. Man, this unit used to be some people's dream unit. People used to love this unit. People still love the unit, right? People still love Alencia. But Alencia used to be one of the most threatening Earth bruisers that was out there. She was able to strip, set up defense buff. She was able to do big single target damage with the S1, S2. She was the most reliable Earth DPS that was out there. And season 1, Alencia was absolutely broken. Even in season 2, she was still very strong. Starting season 3 though, with the meta picking back up and different tank teams just being able to tank her out a lot easier, she stopped seeing as much play, right? And especially also Landy being around. Landy's a unit that kind of serves a similar purpose, right? They're both trying to deal with buff teams where Alencia strips, Landy just does a ton of damage. But with Landy, you also get speed buff, and you just get to do tons of damage over and over again consecutively, whereas Alencia, you only get that first big S3, right? So she's no longer that premier Earth DPS that she used to be. She's not that bruiser dominant unit that everyone used to be afraid of, right? And overall, Earth heroes don't see a lot of play, which is a little bit weird, but it's just a nature of how the game has become, right? And now with Carrot in the mix, she really can't do a lot because she'll just get burned to death by Carrot, and she does nothing against Carrot, right? So Carrot kind of also even shutting down even further. But Alencia, a unit that used to see so much play with this massive S3 to strip and apply defense buff, and the super cool S1 into S2 with tons of single target damage. It's just not enough now to deal with buff teams because they just recycle too fast. Whereas Landy can keep up with the recycling, and she can't keep using her S3 over and over again. Seeing Alencia get something like she's still okay. You can still definitely use her, but she's nothing like the monster she used to be. Now, on to number 3. One unit that is near and dear to my heart is going to be Kron. Now, before you start saying, but King, Kron's still OP. I use him all the time, right? You can still use Kron. He still functions in certain situations, especially still for some defenses, as well as being good for occasional guild wars, right? But it is nothing like what he was when A, he was first released, and B, when he got his initial buff. Kron used to be one of the premier DPSs. Why? At the time, the only real DPSs that we had were Arbiter Vildred and Kron, right? Those are like the two big DPSs, and kind of Stenit, right? T-Cern hadn't gotten her buff. Seaside was still a pretty big threat, and it was like one of Kron's only counters. And overall, there wasn't a lot of really big DPSs. No Landy, right? No oppressive big DPS unit. No Carrots, right? So with that, Kron actually used to be a really good AoE DPS damage dealer, right? He's able to do AoE with S1. He could extend his immortality with S3. And there wasn't that many strippers either. Basar was the most reliable one. Cerise was not nearly as much use, right? And all these other teams could not deal with the S3 and the passive. So you would be able to have a Kron that was guaranteed to get at least 1 to 2 S1s. Which often enough, that was enough to win a game for you, right? With that S1, you're able to win. And then against Cleave, the only real strip that they had was Faithless Litica, where if you had a Fawn Cecilia, they couldn't do anything about both of them, right? And then you could still luck sack them with immunity, they can't stun your Kron, and then you just automatically win against Cleave. Well, now, for Cleave, they have a ton of ways to deal with Arbiter Vildred. They have Cerise, that's the big one. Operator Sigrid can also take off the buffs. Flan being water and tanky, you're not going to be killing her, so they can kill your whole team, and then you can't kill the Flan. And then they also, just C-Set is a lot more prevalent, Cross a lot more prevalent. There's Carrot that can strip him as well. There's a lot more threats to Kron for Cleaves, a lot more strippers, particularly Cerise Dominance, that have overall just shut him down, and including Fairy Tail Tenebria as well, right? So all these big water-dealing units that can strip him, unbuffable him, that can just take away his big S1 guaranteed, has made him kind of washed up, right? While he still has an amazing S1 damage and S3 damage, and both these skills still look sick, and he's getting a skin very soon, and the skin looks amazing, right? And always has, but he's just nothing like he used to be. There are so many threats to him that you will be lucky to get him in an RTA match, right? Or anywhere in PvP for that matter. You can still use him. I still occasionally use him for PvP, especially in Guild Wars. Every once in a while, I'll use him as a fire tank. But for the most part, it's kind of hard with how many strips and how much damage there is in the current meta. So Kron really fallen off from when he used to be. The monstrosity of an AoE damage dealing machine that was guaranteed an S1. So many threats to him. Even Kise at this point. You know, Kise just destroys him too. So it's way too many counters. Kind of suffered from Ravi being so meta as well. since that made people build their water heroes. But now we are moving on to the number 2 hero, and these two you guys are gonna be like, oh yes, I remember them. But Charles, man, this unit used to be a G. He used to be one of the biggest arena defense, Guild Wars defense units, and he used to be just incredibly annoying and busted, right? It was so hard to deal with a good Charles because they usually would pair him with Seaside. And okay, let's say you take a Sermia. Well, if you take a Sermia, now you can't kill the Seaside, right? So it was something that he supplemented the units that were meta at the time so well. He gave attack buff. He had the counter chance to proc, do the S1 into S3, and just pop a unit, right? There was always a threat of the RNG Charles just destroying your team and correcting your posture. Nowadays, though, there's so many units that don't check counter, including Landy, right? Like, Landy doesn't care. Cleave has gotten significantly stronger, right? Because Cleave has gotten a lot of counters, so they have inherently made it stronger. So there's a lot more big DPS heroes. Everyone, Astana is an incredible unit against them now, since no counter. Again, we mentioned Landy. Sermia still exists as a way to counter, and the units that he used to support also got indirectly nerfed. When you think of units like Seaside, right, where he used to pair off really well with Seaside, well, now there's Rowana, right? And Rowana does really well against Charles and against Seaside, right? So that was actually the one that actually stopped the Seaside defense from being as commonly used, was actually Rowana. So again, the support that he used to have for those big units that could do a lot of DPS and can make up for him being an Earth hero that can get one-shot by a Fire hero like Seaside, they have their own checks. And the fact that even on top of all that, he relies on RNG, where there's other units that are way more consistent and way more scary, has really made him fall off. While the S1, S2 is still an iconic thing to do, and you can still use him for PvE, he is nothing in PvP now. There is just too many threats to him, too many things that can't be countered, too much high DPS value that will make him not be able to have the time to set up. And with all the strippers as well, and Bazaar being so prevalent, he's never getting a buff out either, which means he'll be squishy, right? So pretty rough for old man Charles. He's definitely fallen off from what he used to be in every single Guild Wars defense, every single arena defense. Just kind of like still on like a crutch, right? Maybe the Emerald Charles will revitalize people's interest in Charles, and we may see him again, but highly unlikely at this point. And then last, but definitely not least, the only PvE completely power crept unit in this game, Angelica. This is by far the most power crept unit in Epic 7. Why? This unit literally does nothing unique that another character can't do better. You need immunity, you have Ray, right? You need cleansing, she doesn't even have cleansing, right? You can pick Acades. You need healing, Acades or Destina are probably a better choices. You need bulky support, you got Destina, right? You need, you need a consistent immunity and cleanser, you got Momo, right? There's strictly just better units than her. She's strictly just power crept and essentially unusable. There are strictly just better units than her. A Momo, Acades, Destina, Ray, DJ Bazaar, Maid Chloe, all these other, even like Roel to that extent, all Soul Weavers are better, more unique, better healing, more stuff to do than Angelica. She is just an absolute mess, and her base speed does not help her in that regard either, with her being one of the slowest units in the game. Alongside, I believe, someone like Destina, right? Like the dummy slow units in this game. So, with that, that is going to be the top 5 most fallen off, like washed up units. There are still some other ones that I didn't discuss, such something like Cess, where he used to be really good, but he was only good for a very short amount of time, so that's why I didn't include him. But he definitely is someone that could have made it onto this list, with Cess just having fallen off so hard from the meta as well for Arena. He could have honestly been an honorable mention for Cess, and then there's some other ones here and there that, if you're in the past, the trinity of PvE, Haste to an extent used to also be really, really good and just really washed up as well for PvE. So there's a lot of other ones I didn't cover, but if I missed any of these, make sure to comment down below which ones they are. But that is all I got for you guys today, and I will see you next time. Peace!